Take off your uniform. The shout ripped through the cold air like a gunshot, echoing against the steel walls of Fort Branson. The command wasn't just loud, it carried arrogance, expectation, and a kind of poisonous confidence only men with unchecked power dared to use. The room froze, boots stilled, conversations died mid-sentence, and a storm of humiliation swirled around the lone woman standing in the center of the hall. Welcome back to Silent Heroes, the channel that never, never lets the world forget its warriors. The channel that remembers the blood, the sacrifice, the stories others bury. Today, we tell a story they tried to silence. The temperature inside the hall felt colder than the wind outside. Lieutenant Emily Carter, jaw sharp as a blade, posture unbreakable, stood beneath the flickering overhead lights as 3 officers circled her like hungry wolves. They believed she was prey. They believed she was weak. They believed she didn't belong here, and they had no idea what kind of danger they were provoking. Captain Rick Donovan stepped forward, his voice dripping contempt. "Did you hear me, recruit? Take off your uniform." Emily didn't move. Her calmness didn't crack. Not even her breathing changed. The silence wasn't submission. It was a fuse slowly burning towards something none of the men in that room were prepared for. The officers exchanged smirks, nudged each other, whispered insults she'd heard 1,000 times before, in places where men died screaming. But here, the cruelty felt different, cowardly, petty, wrapped in the false authority of a man who had never tasted real fear. Donovan lifted his chin, acting as though he controlled the room, unaware that control had already slipped out of his hands. Lieutenant Jackson Hale leaned toward her with a grin. "What's wrong? Cat got your voice?" Sergeant Reeves laughed under his breath. "She probably thinks she's too good to follow orders." Her boots stayed planted. Her eyes didn't blink. Her stillness unsettled them, though they pretended it didn't. A trained predator can feel when another predator enters the space. Humans sense it too, but deny it until it's too late. Donovan stepped closer, chest puffed, insecure dominance radiating from every inch of him. "Take off your jacket," he ordered, each word sharper, angrier, louder. He wanted fear. He wanted obedience. He wanted to see her break. But she wasn't breaking. She was calculating. The air tightened around them like a noose as officers around the hall paused their work, sensing something about this moment was wrong. Wrong in the way the seconds before an explosion feel too quiet, too calm. Emily finally spoke. Her voice was soft, controlled, too controlled. "Is that part of the assessment, sir?" Donovan smirked. "It is now." A murmur spread through the room. Even those who liked Donovan exchanged uneasy glances. Something about the woman standing in front of them wasn't adding up. Her stillness wasn't fear, it was expertise. Her eyes weren't panicking, they were observing, and her silence wasn't weakness, it was warning. Donovan, too arrogant to sense danger, pushed harder. "Last chance, take off your uniform. You haven't earned the right to wear it." That did it. The last shred of patience evaporated from the air. Every officer felt the shift, but didn't understand it yet. Emily slowly lifted her head, a tiny smirk forming at the corner of her lips. It wasn't amusement, it wasn't rebellion. It was the expression of someone who had just decided the game was over. The kind of smirk soldiers learn only after walking through hell and returning alive. She looked Donovan directly in the eyes, unblinking, cold, merciless. "Sir," she whispered, the softness of her tone more terrifying than a scream, "you just told a Navy SEAL to strip." Time stopped. A wrench dropped. Someone gasped. The ventilation hum seemed to choke mid-whirl, and Donovan, cocky, loud-mouthed Donovan, took an involuntary half-step back. "What?" he breathed, but it wasn't a question. It was the start of fear. Emily unbuttoned her jacket, not in shame, not slowly, but with the precision of someone unveiling a truth sharper than steel. She shrugged the fabric off her shoulders, and there it was, tattooed on her left shoulder, unmistakable, sacred, feared, the trident, the emblem of a warrior, a killer, a shadow, a United States Navy SEAL. Reeves' jaw fell open. Jackson's grin died instantly. The entire hall froze, hanging in the silence like trapped breath. Emily slid the jacket back on, standing tall, posture radiating lethal calm. "You wanted a test, Captain? You're about to get one, but not the one you planned." Someone whispered, "What does she mean?" Someone else muttered, "Something's wrong. Something's really wrong." Emily stepped forward, slow, controlled, deadly, and the officers instinctively parted, giving her a clear path like water pulling away from a blade. Because now they felt it, the danger, the shift, the presence of a warrior who didn't just follow orders, but carried missions that could erase careers, reputations, even lives. And none of them, not one, knew the storm that was about to hit this base. Emily Carter did not come here alone. She brought a judgment, a secret, and a ticking clock. The men who tried to humiliate her had no idea their day wasn't going to end with embarrassment. It was going to end with revelation, a revelation that would rip Fort Branson apart. The leadership test, sabotage, and the darker twist. The morning sun barely touched the training grounds, but Emily Carter was already a force of nature, every muscle coiled, every sense sharpened to an unnatural level. Her boots hit the dirt with precision, each step a message. She wasn't just moving, she was calculating, predicting, dominating. Donovan watched from the sidelines, face tight with disbelief and irritation. "Let's see how long she lasts," he muttered, unaware that the test had already begun, and he wasn't in control anymore. Emily's eyes scanned the course with deadly calm. Every wall, every rope, every obstacle was cataloged, memorized, and ready to be conquered. She moved like a weapon, not a trainee, and everyone around her could feel it in their gut. The whistle blew. Emily launched forward, boots digging into the soil, arms swinging with mechanical perfection. The tire run, the hurdles, the rope climb, they were nothing but warm-ups to her. Donovan's voice cracked through the air. "Keep it simple, don't show off." But she wasn't showing off. She was performing at a level that defied explanation, executing moves that made even the most seasoned instructors question reality. Reeves muttered, "She's not human," and for once, no one laughed. Jackson, standing by the mud pit, tried to conceal a smirk, hiding a metal bar in a move meant to sabotage. Seconds later, Emily was there, faster than the human eye could track. Her hand snapped out, disarming him in one fluid motion, the bar tossed aside, her boots already pounding toward the next hurdle. The men around her staggered back, hearts pounding, not with admiration, but with the sudden cold realization that they had misjudged her. By the time she vaulted over the final wall, rolled into a flawless sprint, and crossed the finish line, the stopwatch in the instructor's hand read 2 minutes, 16 seconds. Impossible. Unreal. Donovan's jaw tightened. "No, that's not possible." Emily didn't respond. She just adjusted her jacket, eyes scanning every officer, every corner. This wasn't a race. This was an exhibition of precision, of dominance, and of quiet judgment. She had arrived not to participate. She had arrived to expose. Next was firearms. Donovan expected hesitation, expected a missed shot, expected human error. But Emily's first rifle round struck the bullseye of a moving target without a single pause. Her transition to the pistol was seamless. 3 rounds, perfectly grouped, each pulling the trigger like she was breathing. The instructor's clipboard shook in disbelief. Reeves whispered, "We're screwed," and Jackson's hand twitched nervously. Donovan barked orders under his breath, but the commands fell flat. She wasn't performing. She was operating at a level where errors were impossible. Every motion was preordained, every decision instantaneous. The psychological tension in the field was almost suffocating. No one dared breathe too loudly. Every onlooker was trapped in awe and fear, watching a living weapon unfold before their eyes. Then came the hand-to-hand combat. Donovan chose Jackson, strong, confident, cocky, ready to prove dominance. Emily walked onto the mat with a calmness that made the air itself hesitate. Jackson charged, brute force only. She sidestepped, twisted his arm, and slammed him to the mat in 2 seconds flat. The room erupted in shocked gasps. Jackson scrambled to his feet, only to meet the same unrelenting efficiency. Knee to spine, arm locked, tap, never. She released him with a glance that felt like a predator showing mercy to a smaller animal. Donovan's face was a mixture of anger, disbelief, and fear. His entire authority evaporated in the span of a heartbeat, and he knew it. Every trial, every test, every move Emily executed carried a hidden layer. She wasn't just passing assessments, she was documenting corruption, she was exposing arrogance, she was creating evidence. Every subtle smirk, every micro-failure she allowed the officers to witness, every humiliation she absorbed, it was all for the record. Donovan's attempts to dominate her had unwittingly written his own indictment. The audience, the instructors, trainees, and the men watching, were now unwitting witnesses to the unraveling of a corrupt leadership system from within. Emily's true mission was hidden behind the veil of obedience and precision. Her presence was not for recognition, it was for accountability, exposure, and judgment. As the course continued, Emily navigated every potential sabotage, every hidden trap, every subtle interference, every psychological trick thrown her way with the precision of someone who survived war zones where hesitation meant death. Jackson tried again, subtly, shifting an obstacle in her path. She paused, barely perceptible, and in a blink the obstruction was neutralized, her motion fluid, graceful, impossible to predict. The spectators' jaws dropped. No one had ever moved like this, not in simulation, not in combat, not in training scenarios designed for elite operators. Emily was rewriting the rules of what was physically and mentally possible in a training environment. And with each move, the tension escalated, the kind of tension that tightens your chest, quickens your pulse, and leaves your mouth dry. Donovan's attempts to intervene were growing frantic. His face turned red, words cracking with every shouted command. But Emily wasn't flustered. She operated above emotion, above fear, above any need to prove herself to these men. Her eyes were scanning, calculating, analyzing, not just the course, but the people around her, the environment, the hidden motives, the subtle signs of weakness and corruption. Every glance, every gesture, every micro-expression in the room fed into a mental map of the power structure she had been sent to evaluate. By the end of the obstacle course, every officer present understood they had made a grave mistake. The woman they had tried to humiliate was untouchable, and worse, she wasn't even done. The firearms segment was next, and Donovan's confidence wavered. He expected errors, he expected stress, he expected human fallibility. He got perfection. Emily moved through rifles, pistols, and rapid-fire drills with a fluidity that seemed impossible, her muscle memory executing sequences faster than conscious thought. Moving targets fell with mathematical precision. Observers whispered, "She's not human," and they weren't exaggerating. Emily's mind and body operated as one, a singular instrument of efficiency honed to lethal perfection. And behind every controlled movement was the hidden agenda: Donovan's failure, Jackson's hubris, Reeves' arrogance, cataloged, documented, and being recorded in ways none of them could see. The deeper twist, Emily's real mission, lay concealed beneath layers of extraordinary skill, deception, and silent judgment. Finally, the hand-to-hand combat trial cemented the narrative. Jackson lunged again, confident, aggressive, ready to dominate. Emily sidestepped, pivoted, and executed joint locks and counters that left him flat on the mat multiple times before he could even comprehend the sequence. Every time he tried to assert dominance, she read the move, anticipated the error, and neutralized it instantly. The room's ambient noise, the rustling of uniforms, the clanging of equipment, the whispered astonishments, faded into a tense silence as the officers realized Emily wasn't performing, she was evaluating, testing, documenting, and exposing. Her purpose was bigger than any trial, bigger than any assessment, bigger than the fragile egos of Donovan, Jackson, and Reeves. She was a weapon and an investigator. Every humiliating order they had ever issued to new recruits, every underestimation they had ever made, every corrupt act, they were now under scrutiny, invisible but absolute. By the end of the day, Emily had run, fired, fought, and calculated her way through every conceivable challenge. Her presence alone had transformed the environment into a crucible that revealed weakness, arrogance, and corruption at every level. The officers had misjudged her, humiliated her, and now they were powerless. Every move she made carried a dual meaning: flawless execution in the physical realm, and in the psychological and administrative realm, complete exposure of their incompetence. Donovan's attempts at leadership had been dismantled piece by piece, quietly but unmistakably, without a single moment of overt confrontation. And yet, the ultimate revelation had not come. Emily's eyes scanned the training grounds one last time, lingering on faces twisted in disbelief, on stances frozen mid-reaction, on the subtle dynamics of dominance and fear. Her mission wasn't finished. What the men saw as extraordinary skill was actually the front line of a more strategic operation. The dark twist, the real danger they had unleashed by trying to break her, was still unfolding. Their arrogance had set the stage for their own downfall. And Emily Carter, the Navy SEAL, the observer, the shadow of judgment, had every step meticulously planned, every sequence accounted for, every misjudgment of theirs cataloged for maximum consequence. By the time the whistle signaled the end, Donovan understood, too late, that this wasn't an ordinary assessment. He had allowed a weapon to walk into his hall, and by every measure, he had underestimated not just the skill, but the purpose behind it. Emily wasn't here to participate. She was here to judge. She was here to record. She was here to prove, beyond doubt, that arrogance underestimates consequences at its own peril. Every officer present was left with a single, chilling realization. They had crossed someone whose mission extended beyond the training field, beyond the base, beyond even their authority. And as Emily gathered her equipment, her eyes met each officer with the cold, precise evaluation of a predator who had already decided their fates. Donovan's face was pale, jaw tight, every instinct screaming retreat, apology, or both. But there was nothing he could do. This was beyond his control, beyond his understanding, and beyond the limits of any assessment he had ever designed. The dark twist of the day, the hidden truth, the mission behind the mission, remained invisible, yet it radiated from her presence, suffocating, precise, and utterly undeniable. Emily turned toward the exit, each step deliberate, controlled, silent, and utterly final. The shadow of what had happened, the combination of skill, judgment, and silent evaluation, hung in the room like smoke after a fire, and the officers knew deep down that they had just survived a reckoning they hadn't even realized had begun. Their arrogance, their attempts to humiliate, their petty gains, it had all been turned against them in ways they could never admit, never escape, and never undo. The training grounds had become a proving field for more than endurance, skill, or obedience. It had become a stage for truth, exposure, and judgment. And Emily Carter, Navy SEAL, silent observer, unstoppable weapon, had just begun. The judgment, career collapse, and the final vengeance twist. Emily Carter stood at the center of the conference room, the sealed envelope heavy in her hand, a symbol heavier than any weapon she had ever carried into combat. The Rear Admiral's signature glimmered faintly on the parchment, commanding authority, judgment, and consequence. Donovan's eyes widened the moment he recognized the insignia. Every shred of confidence, Arrogance and bravado he had carried into the room earlier evaporated like smoke. The officers around him, Jackson, Reeves, and the rest, froze mid-step, mid-breath, mid-thought. They were no longer in a training assessment. They were subjects of judgment. Emily placed the envelope on the table with a deliberate calm, the sound sharp, metallic, echoing against the walls, each officer flinching as if it were a gunshot. Her eyes scanned the room slowly, deliberately, letting each officer feel the weight of what had just happened. "Captain Donovan," she said, her voice soft but imbued with authority. "Your leadership authority has been suspended pending review. All treatment of new personnel will be scrutinized by higher command." The words landed like hammers. Faces went pale, hearts raced. The psychological collapse that began internally now spilled outward like a domino effect. Officers glanced at each other, attempting to anchor themselves in the absurdity of disbelief, but the truth was undeniable. Jackson's face turned a violent shade of red, veins bulging with humiliation and anger. This can't, she set us up," he shouted, fists clenching. Emily's gaze didn't waver, unwavering, lethal in its stillness. "No," she replied calmly, "you set yourselves up. I just followed orders." The silence that followed was suffocating, the kind that presses on your chest and makes your lungs ache. Donovan opened his mouth, stammering, "Wait, this can be reconsidered?" Emily shook her head slowly. "No, this is final." Every syllable dripped with authority, finality, and the quiet fury of someone who had watched arrogance destroy itself from within. She turned to the entire room, letting her presence fill every corner. "For those of you who wish to lead, who wish to command, remember this. Leadership is not about barking orders or exposing weakness for amusement. It is about earning respect, protecting those under your command, and being accountable for your actions. Strength is earned, respect is earned, but cruelty only exposes your own fragility." The officers could barely nod. Some lowered their heads, some clenched their fists, but none spoke. No one dared. Emily opened the sealed envelope and began reading from it, her voice steady but heavy with emotion, silent anger, controlled fury, heartbreak. Each word carved through the room like a scalpel, dissecting lies, deception, and negligence. Every officer present understood that they had been exposed not just for incompetence, but for arrogance, for cruelty, for failing to see the human behind the uniform. The room felt suffocating. The walls themselves seemed to lean in, judging, observing, echoing the weight of accountability that Emily carried like armor. Donovan swallowed hard, throat dry, eyes flicking from Emily to the document to the Rear Admiral's insignia again, realizing in that moment that he had lost control, perhaps forever. Then came the final, deadly twist. Emily's eyes flickered ever so slightly, a shadow, almost imperceptible, but Donovan, Jackson, and Reeves saw it. She had uncovered more than just incompetence. Behind the petty humiliation, behind the arrogance of men who believed power was entitlement, there was a larger conspiracy, hidden and dangerous, that threatened not just personnel integrity, but national security. The envelope was not just an assessment, it was the beginning of a chain reaction. Emily's mission was far from over. She had come for justice, yes, but she had come prepared to dismantle a system that had quietly metastasized under the guise of authority. And with the suspension of Donovan, the documentation of corruption, and the exposure of deception, the foundation of their power had already begun to crumble. She moved toward the door, the officers still frozen, their minds racing, their hearts pounding in an unsteady rhythm. Emily paused at the threshold, turning slightly, letting her voice carry, calm yet piercing. "Next time you choose to humiliate someone, ensure you know exactly who you are dealing with." She didn't need to shout. Her authority, presence, and unwavering calm delivered more impact than any raised voice could have. Each officer understood the weight of her words, the consequences of underestimating someone like her. Emily's mission concluded, but her journey did not end here. She reached for her phone, recording a final confidential report. The camera caught the controlled fury in her eyes, the heartbreak of betrayal by men she had once assumed were leaders. "Mission complete," she said softly, eyes narrowing. "They failed, but perhaps, somewhere, a lesson has been learned. Leadership isn't about arrogance, it's about responsibility, it's about integrity." She walked toward the awaiting vehicle, a black SUV driven by a junior insignia who saluted crisply. Emily smiled, a small, controlled smirk, sharper than any blade she had ever wielded. "Everything ready?" she asked. The response was affirmative, and she slid into the seat, pulling the door closed. Outside, the base was silent, officers still staring at the document, at each other, at the reality they had failed to control. Donovan's career, his authority, his ego, all suspended in a state of permanent uncertainty. Emily Carter, Navy SEAL, silent hero, never looked back. She didn't need to. She was not seeking validation. She created it. As the SUV pulled away, Emily's thoughts turned briefly to the wider mission, the hidden conspiracies yet to unravel, the truth still waiting beneath layers of deception. Her journey was far from over, but the first chapter of reckoning was complete. She had struck without warning, revealed without mercy, and judged without bias. The officers of Fort Branson would not forget today. They would never forget the precision, the skill, the lethal calm, and the relentless pursuit of accountability that Emily had demonstrated. And now, to you, the viewers. If this story of courage, skill, and the relentless pursuit of justice has found even a small space in your mind, I invite you to become part of Silent Heroes. Hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and comment below to let me know where in the world you are watching from. Your support helps ensure that stories of bravery, discipline, and true leadership continue to be told. Because, in a world full of noise, arrogance, and forgotten heroes, your voice matters, your engagement matters, and together we make sure that no silent hero is ever forgotten. Remember, strength is earned, respect is earned, cruelty only exposes weakness. Subscribe, like, comment, let us know where in the world you are watching from, because your voice fuels this journey. And with every story, every mission, every hero revealed, we honor those who make the impossible possible.